Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. I'll ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. If at some point throughout the meeting you find that you do, please declare it at that time. Under new business, we have the Director of Finance and Treasurer's report, so I will pass it over to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, as mentioned in the report, staff have had several meetings and had an opportunity to go through the opening 2020 budget, starting with the forecast and additions that have been identified at this time and any adjustments. And following our I'll have a short presentation overview for you this morning, or this afternoon rather, and then following that, after there's discussions and whatever directions we receive from council, we'll go forward to prepare draft 2. And in draft 2, we'll bring some further discussion with reserves and long-term forecasting at that time when we do look at it at the next draft.
So the presentation going up here is what you've handed out here?
Yes, that's what we put out. We'll put that up on the website after the meeting today. So the budget addresses some of council's priorities, and specifically priority number 2, supporting twin pad arenas and library locations. So that's addressed in the budget. We also have number 7, maintain the financial health of the town while meeting the service needs of the community. We have priority 9, review the town's assets and determine a strategy to deal with them in the best interest of the municipality. And number 11, build an efficient, well-functioning, customer-oriented organization to deliver on council's priorities. So we look at these priorities as we're determining what items we need to focus on in setting the budget. So this first slide gives you a really high-level overview of what's happening with the budget compared to 2019. So our tax rate increase, the change from 2019 to 2020, is at 4.19%. We did start out with a forecast that was at 10.8. With our additions and some of the items brought forward by the department, we ended up at 16.7, and after our discussions and our looking at the budget and what we could remove and what we could leave in, we've now brought it down to 4.19, 4.2% is where we're sitting at the moment. With that, our reserves and our reserve funds, we will be drawing on them 24 million. The bulk of that number is related to obligatory reserves for the capital projects, and you'll see some of that as we move forward. We also increase our debt by 5.9 million, and again, you'll see some of that in some of the other slides that I'm going to show you as to what drives the debt increase. And if we look at our budget in 2020, we're at 78 million for the capital and operating budgets. As compared in 2019, we had a $64 million budget. And you can notice in the pies, it gives you a good indication of what, the names aren't appearing on the slide, but the capital is the main change in 2020 for the increase up to 49%. And so let me just skip that. Okay, thanks. So it was 37%, thank you, 37% in 2019 for capital, and we've gone up to 49%. So we have a lot of projects that are increased in this budget. And the total change from 2019 to 2020 is $14.5 million. Are there any questions on this slide before I move forward? And some of the questions will get answered as I move through some of the slides.
Is there anything at this point?
Okay. So now if we take our proposed tax rate that is calculated for this draft 1 budget, and we compare where we are with the other urban municipalities and their 2019 tax rates, you can see that the town is at the lower end of the rankings there, and that our change in the dollars for an average household between $350,000 and $450,000, our municipal portion only would have a monthly increase of approximately $6.60 to a home valued at $350,000 or $8.50 to a home valued at $450,000. That gives you just a slight indication of where we sit in relation to our comparators before they have looked at their 2020 budgets. And that is with our 2020 draft 1 change. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Jocelyn. So, am I reading this correctly, that if today you owned a $350,000 home, if we at this point decided to have our 2020 budget reflect a 4.19 increase, what they would see on their monthly taxation bill, which you don't pay per month, or you could, I guess, is an increase of $6.60.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So now we'll look a little bit closer at the operating budget, which is $39.7 million. And this slide shows you that the main operational cost is in Public Works. 36% of the operating costs go there. And followed that by the community services. So in community services we have police and fire, recreation, events, facilities, and library. And that community services portion is 29% of the $39 million. And then we have general government, which includes parking and bylaw, and the beachfront and the debenture financing and some of our committees. That runs at 11% of the operating costs, followed by our corporate services, where we have administration, clerks, treasury, and IT departments, and that's 10% of our operating costs.
Sorry, Your Worship, to Jocelyn again. On my slide, library has 2. So you've got it in community services, and you've got another arrow pointing to 2%. What would that 2% be, or is that really supposed to be over in community services?
Can I get back to you on answering that question? It's
Perfect.
a good question, but I'm going to come back to you on that one.
Thank you.
I'm just not quite clear myself on why I would have that. And it could be as simple as it should not have the library over here under community services, because I've pulled it out separately.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay, so on the capital expenditures, it's $39 million for the capital expenditures. And we have on here we have the wastewater, which is $8.6 million, and that's 22% of the budget. We also have roads and bridges, which is the larger portion at $10.5 million, and that's 27% of the budget. So together, those two programs and services, they represent about 49% of the total portion of the capital budget. We also have the remaining public works programs, and they run another 10%. We have storm drainage projects, which are there's quite a few additional projects in this area this year, and they're $3.6 million at 10% as well. So this just gives you a general idea, and then at the top there you can see we have $8.2 million included this year at 21% of the capital budget for the new arena, and the new library at 6%. Do we have any questions on this one? Okay. Okay, so we'll look at some of the actual dollars that are driving the cost changes for 2020 in the operating budget. So the total, again, the operating budget's $39.7 million, and the change, we've actually gone down about $400,000 if you compared it to 2019. But there's a lot of ins and outs going on here, as you can see on these two slides. So our COLA and step increases, and this includes the union and non-union increases, they're $412,000. We have left in the budget a few positions, and they are total $214,000. And then with the benefits that are associated with those increases there's another $231,000 in benefits. We also are phasing in the compensation grid, so that's $134,000. Policing went up by $99,000 this year. In our estimate, we have not yet actually done the adjustment to actual. We just received the actuals recently, so they'll show up in draft 2. The fire, we have some refurbishments to do on the vehicle, and it's $110,000. And the library, we have some additional operating costs added for the library budget at $90,000.
Councillor Foster, you have something?
Yeah, just on that, I just want to make sure I heard this right. So you talked about the new positions being 214 grand, and then I believe your next line said the benefit increase related to those is 231. I'm assuming that's the benefit increase across the organization, not related to 2 or 3 positions.
No, it's related to the 412 and the,
the cool
214
okay.
And all the adjustments for any of the salary change.
Yeah, sorry, I had heard that it was related to just 2 new positions. I thought it was pretty cool.
Sorry, good to clarify that.
60% increase in benefits for, anyway, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and so then if we look at some of the reductions that we put through in the budget this year, we have the transfer to the reserve. Unfortunately, our grant is coming down, so we cannot contribute as much to the grant as we could in 2019. Our beachfront enforcement program, we have removed it, so that program had expenditures of $154,000. The Main Street Market expenditures were $69,000. We also are not repeating the after-hours clinic in the draft 1 budget at this time, so that's $171,000 in expenditures. Our debenture payments have reduced in 2020 as compared to 2019, and you'll see later slide that shows some of that change. And we also cannot contribute to the OSIV obligatory reserve this year because we have not been advised at this time of any funding coming from that grant source in 2020. We are still hopeful that there may be something announced, but there hasn't been anything announced to date. And then we do have an engineering standards update that needs to take place in 2020, so that one's been added in for this year as well.
The reduction to the after-hours clinic. I'm correct in assuming, and if not, correct me, that that's because it was a pilot to end this year. There's where the difference comes in, but if we continue it, then this would be an add back in.
Yes, if you continued it, we'd need to add that amount back in because it was covered through reserves previously.
Yep.
And that would be a taxation impact unless we again used reserves, but it wouldn't be sustainable to use reserves ongoing.
Right. So this 171 is based on not continuing the pilot. If the pilot's continued, then we're back into adding that back in from someplace.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So if we look at the capital projects and what projects are driving the capital budget for 2020, we have, again, the total capital budget is $38.7 million, and the change from 2019 is $14.9 million. So we have a lot going on there in large projects. We have the West End Depot, and there's $1 million for that project. The arena is in at 6.4. It does include an amount for land. It's just a placeholder amount at this time so that we can see the impact if we were choosing a site that had land. But there's $5.6 million as a placeholder in that 6.4 number there. The library also has land as a placeholder of about $1.3 million included in that 2.2 shown there. We have a lot of water and wastewater projects for a total of $8.6 million. Again, a lot of storm drainage projects, the 3.6. We have some fleet, public works fleet vehicles that have been included at this time at a total of $1.3 million. We also have the bridge and road works, and in this number is the Main Street Bridge, which is carrying forward into the 2020 budget, so it's 10.6 million. Under the parks, we have 437,000. We have some monies in to begin to look at the upgrading of the fire station 2 and renovating that fire station, so just some beginning dollars to start to look at that project, and that's 108. There are some light duty vehicles for the fire department, 2 of them there for 140,000. We also have some transit vehicles included in the specialized transit, and that's 265,000. We have some plans here in the classroom and in the town hall in general to do some renovations. That's 175,000. And then each year we have day labor projects as part of the Public Works capital budget, and it's 410,000, which is typical for the day labor projects. That gives you a sense of the majority of the capital projects that are driving the capital budget this year. Okay. So if we look now at our debt side of things, our annual repayment limit that is set by the province and based on a calculation, and each year they give us an update of how much we're allowed to spend, and right now our carrying costs, we're allowed to carry up to 6.6 million in debt costs based on our user fees and our revenue streams. And currently we're carrying 1.4 million. So we're using about 27% of our room in the debt envelope. And in 2020, 2 of the debentures that we had in place, one for the water sewer truck and one for a fire truck, those debentures are completed in 2019. So you can see them there at the top of the schedule, but they're not impacting the 2020 budget. So that opens up a bit more room. However, then we add 3 new debentures in 2020. We had one for the arena, one for the fire truck, which was a 2019 budget item, but it's rolling over into 2020 because the truck will probably be delivered in January, February, March timeframe of next year. And we have the Main Street Bridge again. It's rolling over. That loan will start to be incurred in 2020. And those are only a portion of the loans because they start different times of the year. So while I show a decrease there of 21,000 on the total principal and interest compared to 2019, that's going to increase when you start to annualize these new debentures over a full year's period. So in 2021, these same, if you did nothing else from a debenture standpoint, you'd still go up 351,000 just from annualizing the payments over a 12-month period rather than maybe 8 months or 2 months in some cases.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you. If I may, when we're looking at the debt servicing costs, the upper chart there's 2 under Beachfront with 212, 250, and 276. I'm more concerned about the maturity dates. One is 2025, not so bad, but the other one at a little over 3.25% is till 2040. Is there an option on either one of those? Because those are the highest, the highest rate ones that will be intact. The water sewer truck was higher. Is there repayment options on those, or are they fixed? Sorry about your luck, you're done.
So I had a conversation with the representative from Ontario, the infrastructure funding program this week, and we were talking about that, and he said he's looking into it for me, but he said likely the penalties to get out of the program and under the current loan is going to outweigh any benefit of bringing down that interest rate, but he is still looking into the calculation for me so that we can at least know that we've reviewed it and see if there's any opportunity.
And that's the one that goes to 2040.
That's right.
2040, yes.
If a follow-up on that.
Sure.
Then. So we also have investment funds, they're not shown here, but their rate of return is lower than that,
Yes.
3.28%. So we're sitting there going, we've got a debt we're paying this amount for, our income or our investments are making less, and we have capital assets that we're looking at disposing of. There's a variety of them. There could be another flow of income from an external source, and you're sitting there going, we're stuck with this 3 point. Anyway, it's not a staff concern. Well, it is a staff concern, but I think it's a serious concern that we're stuck till 2040 in a non-repayable loan.
I would agree with you on that.
Thank you.
Councillor Wells, did I see your hand up?
Well, it's just a question of who's carrying that. Is it LAS or is it Ontario Infrastructure?
So the one that goes to 2040 is Ontario Infrastructure.
Okay. Yeah, that was actually, I sat in on one of the sessions back in August at AMO that they put on. From the audience, that was one of the issues that came up was once you're in, you're in. And there was a few municipalities saying that was a considerable issue. Once they've got you till death do us part. Yeah. So.
Okay, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Worship. What are these amounts for? This is Beachfront, and I assume these were put on a couple of years ago, a few years ago.
Yeah, so this is the purchase of beachfront lands, and it was split between two loan, financed one through a commercial bank, half of it, and the other half through Ontario Infrastructure. The financing through the bank, the commercial banking, allows you to terminate the loan earlier if you have the means to, whereas the Ontario Infrastructure does not. So 50% was in the commercial, and 50% of the cost was in the Ontario Infrastructure.
So it's an ongoing loss based on the purchase of those waterfront properties.
It's an ongoing cost.
Yes,
the loss, the intent of that was always to the offset sale of the lands.
But even if we were to sell it all to pay this off early, there's a penalty for that.
If you paid it off early, yes. If you could invest it in the equity fund is earning around between 7 to 11% depending on the market conditions. We have earned previously around the 11% per year rate, but currently we're down around 7%. So if you invest those funds, you can offset some of that. There's some options there when we get to that point.
All right. Okay. All right. Moving on.
So now I've just taken here of what the long-term debt actually looks like on the balance sheet when we move into 2020. So at the end of 2019, we're going to have $13.4 million on the balance sheet of debt that we owe. And by the end of 2020, based on these debentures, we would be at $19.3 million. So that's an increase in our debt of $5.9 million over 2019. And and it shows again the two debentures finishing at the top.
All right. Thank you. I think as we move through this, there will be people in the public saying they're increasing it by $5 million, but I think we need to take into account the number of projects that we have on the go. Most people around this table have been through this budget process several times, and we all know that the more you put capital off, it catches up to you. If you take years of saying we're going to keep the tax rate low, we'll put these jobs off, it all catches up eventually. And I think that's kind of where we're hitting things now. There's also, I think with our operating, we need to take into account that over the years, people want more parks and they want beautification, they want all these things, but we need to start hiring staff to look after those things. So everything comes at a cost, and I think we just need to recognize that as we're going forward. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, I was going to make this comment a little later, but when you look at the capital projects we're putting ourselves into, there is, again, potential significant flow of income coming from sources that weren't available before. So the sale of property is one. The casino revenue is going to come on stream sometime in the next year, and you're sitting there going, that's great, we can get rid of, for example, the street lights, we can chunk down on the arena, the fire truck, Main Street Bridge, we can even get rid of some of the beachfront piece, the part that is at the commercial bank, not through the Ontario Investment Fund. But I guess the challenge, so it's a double-edged sword, and Councillor Wells brought it up earlier. I mean, the people will be looking at glomming onto the fact that there's 171 for an after-hours clinic that seems to be falling off the table. It's not. It's not in any way, shape, or form. That's part of a further discussion. But the other part I want to bring up, not so much for Jocelyn, but as a heads up, is and I completely commend staff. I know when it showed at 10.85% at the end of last year's budget process, I said this is going to, create all kinds of excitement, which it did. And then it went up to 16 point, whatever the number was, 7%. And I go, that people's heads would explode. I certainly have to commend staff for bringing it down to the 4.19 or whatever it is before it's even come to our table. That being said, prudent planning would be to sit there and say, we're obviously going to try and trim and do what we can. However, if there are capital that we're going to sell or income streams that we've never realized before, we also should be giving staff a heads up as to, look, if we end up with extra funds sitting here, we can do one of several things. We can, refill the reserves if necessary. We can, but one of the things would be the projects that were cut. So the 12% decrease between when they sat down 2 weeks ago and today, there are probably some real gems in there that have been delayed, whatever. So I would suggest that perhaps the department heads or staff kind of wander through and say, look, if in July we start to receive checks, money coming in, or we sell a piece of land, and I'm hoping that we get every penny out that we put in. That would be the best case scenario. More would be the best case scenario. But that we sit there and say, let's have a plan B as to what's going to happen when that comes in. The budget's set start of the year, but things happen mid-year. So I commend staff for the ruthless cutting they've done, but at the same time, I think we have to keep in mind what happened. Like you said, we can't. There's growth pressures on this town, and you can't get something for nothing. But if we do end up getting a flow of income from other sources, we have to sit there and say, what's the best use of that capital? I would love to see it cut down debt at 3.82% or whatever it was, just because of the sheer number is big. But again, we gotta look at what's the best use of that capital, and I know staff will do that. I just want it out there as a reminder.
I don't think any of our staff are shy. I think they'll come forward if there's an opportunity. Anybody else? Did you have your hand up, Stan? No. Anyone else? That's it for budget talks. George, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick point, just in terms of debt, is that incurring debt is part of a balanced approach in terms of funding the capital program is a wise use of that instrument, especially when interest rates are quite low. And if you look at the interest rates that are shown there, they are quite low. So to incur debt when a time where interest rates are at a reasonable level is a wise way of doing that, in the sense that the rates are low and that future residents of the community are helping to pay for those capital budget items that are going to be they're going to benefit from as we go down the line. So that's a commendable way of looking at financing your capital program. Thank you.
Justin?
Maybe I'll just add as well, when we're in the construction phase of building some of these buildings, we take out what's called construction financing, and that's at a lower rate as well. And during that, you can hold the construction financing for up to a period of 5 years, and you can pay it down during that time period. So we may find that we have some opportunities there to not have to put in place so much long-term debt when we actually get to the end of the 5-year construction window.
All right, Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Worship. And it was brought home last night at our open house that what we're talking here, arenas and libraries, these buildings are there for 50, 60 years. They're an investment in the community, and as the CAO mentioned, you you finance it to allow the sharing of expense in that for future coming into the town and future generations. And we've all seen the buildings. Our current arena's 50 some odd years old, and it's still a viable building, but we're moving forward. So I think you have to look long term at this.
Okay, is there any other questions for Jocelyn at this time? Okay. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Kenny. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole, its Budget Committee, recommend to Council that it receive the Treasurer's report on the first draft of the 2020 operating and capital budget for information and discussion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Jocelyn. Next is an update on the Twin Pad and Library site criteria. Chris and Pam, are you joining us for this?
Good afternoon, everyone. Pam and I have prepared this report regarding a decision matrix in which staff plan to rank and most importantly highlight the various attributes so that we can have a summarized look of strengths and challenges that any one of the remaining 3 arena sites and 4 library sites have and the bearing that they have upon our decision to decide. Most importantly, I think we should highlight the idea that the hopes are to ratify this decision by the end of October so that we're well poised for the November 12th submittal deadline for our infrastructure funding grant. Other than that, maybe I'll look to Pam if she has anything to add, and maybe questions from council otherwise.
I think that our goal is to really bring you all the information that we have at our fingertips. Obviously, the costing criteria is new since our last evaluation, and certainly the public input, we will certainly be taking a close look at that data when it comes in. We're doing our best to get as much feedback as we can from the community. So I think that will certainly help you inform your decision on which one you choose.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure we've all read it. Is there any questions on it? Councillor Foster?
Yes, sorry, Your Worship, I was actually just trying to look up a calculation there. When you look at, so there's 2 parts to this question, or 1 part's a comment, 1 part's a question. First, after this matrix that you've laid out is great, and the public opinion section is in your matrix, in the calculation that's going to position these, the priority of these places. The public opinion counts for about 30%. So, and I think that's great. I think that's excellent. The other big piece is of course cost is the other 30%, and the rest is a variety of other items. I guess my question related to this is. We had this meeting last night, and I don't know what the attendance was, a couple hundred, 300 in and out through. I want, and we have a very short time window to get this. I was trying to look up what the statistically significant number is. What are the number of responses that, from a statistical point of view, would be considered accurate 95 out of 100 times? I want to make sure that we have not left any stone unturned as far as getting the message out. We've been asking. I've seen it on social media. I've seen it in the newspaper. On the radio. In fact, I think it was even on the Rogers TV channel as a little ticker tape down below. Is there anything from the staff point of view that you see, or I guess from the rest of the council, that can make sure that we get the message out? It could be. Statistics might say 350 people is statistically significant in a population of 20,000. I don't know that. I was looking it up. But I would feel much more comfortable if we could get 2,000 or 3,000 people, because then you're bang on. The law of large numbers would say this is really, really what's the most popular, and it accounts for 30%. So it's an important piece. So I just wondered if staff had any comment as to any way, even the electric signs, anything we can use to.
And Chris, we had a discussion this morning, I think we were reaching out again to all the different sports groups, but
Certainly. I think that your target number is fairly close. I do remember this working with CBRE consultants when we did our community hub survey. Some of you may remember about 18 months ago. It was in at about 300. We are moving our deadline to Monday the 7th at this point. And as far as I know, yesterday we had 225 respondents. So I do think 3,000 is somewhat high over 1 week's time, but I do think 300, and I'm not 100%, but I think it's about 300. That is our statistically significant number, but we can research that back and definitely layer that into our report when we bring back the ranked matrix. We can all look at that public opinion number with a grain of salt and some of the other information that we garner from this ranking of the public opinion survey.
And I know our communications department will be blasting it out again. We're going to reach out to all of the sporting groups, asking them to forward it to all of their families and really encourage people to fill it out. Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Worship. Are we talking about the graphs here, the options, and all the costs associated with it? Is this part of this discussion right now?
We're talking about the matrix for...
Just the percentages at this point?
Yeah, what are you looking at?
Well, okay, I'll go back. The cost charts I'm looking at, so...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the blue ones that we used on the website. Okay, certainly. I know.
Yeah, if you have a question.
If that's okay. I'm just a little concerned about the Glenwood site here where we have a total cost in of $815, which does not reflect the cost that, we own it, but there was a cost associated with purchasing it. And I know there's a non-disclosure about the cost to purchase it. There was a number put out in the newspaper quite some time ago on there, but I think that needs to be clear to the public that the cost is not $815,000 for that site. It's just it warps the whole grid really by not plugging a number in.
Chris?
Well, I certainly understand where you're coming from. These town-owned properties, there is an opportunity cost considering what else could be done. And I will note for councillors who may not have seen, there is I believe it was a triple asterisk, I don't have the document in front of me, but at the bottom of that chart, that is a staff estimate based on a number of recent property appraisals that we had. And this does outline, although it wouldn't be an inherent cost of building on that property. It just shows that there is a value to that land if it wasn't used for parking or what else could be used.
Thank you. Yeah, it says an estimated market value, which is different than the actual cost. And some of the public lands, sports park, they were bought years ago. That the value may not be. This being purchased within the last 2 years has a current cost to it, which would reflect going out and buying a piece right now, because most the private ones are going to have a price tag attached to it, and this one certainly has a price tag way higher than $815 attached to this piece.
And I don't disagree with you on that. We did have this discussion, and I think I would ask staff to think about this again before we do final evaluations. There is some thoughts on that. Next we have Councillor Kinney, then Wells, and then Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you, Worship, and back to Pam and Chris. Just getting back to the public portion of your matrix. I do like what Councillor Foster mentioned about significantly important numbers, because I know public and how they feel about the sites is extremely important, and if we can get as much body out of that section as possible, I think that'll help us filter out some of the other stuff, because again, being at that meeting last night, there was a lot of very thoughtful people there, trying to evaluate, looking at all the stuff, and if we can again harness that make the choices, maybe not easier, but when we finally get done, a better choice.
Thank you. Councillor Wells?
A couple of comments. One, I guess I'm somewhat in a different space than Councillor Watson with respect to the cost of the properties that we already own. Yep, we had to pay for them, but that at this point in time is water under the bridge. It's happened, it's done, it's over. We own them. And so in terms of moving forward to look at costing as a factor for the development of either an arena or a library, I personally don't think it is necessarily valid to try to jump back and come up with the figure that whatever was paid for it. Because, as I said, that's done, it's over, we own that land. We have the option of selling that land, perhaps for whatever purpose, and that money is at that point becomes money that could be turned back into a facility, or we build on that land, which means that we're spending less for the land for that particular facility, which may allow us then to spend more money on the facility itself, because we're not expending millions of dollars for the purchase price. So I'm not on the same page, George, with that analysis. I think those properties are owned, and so whatever we paid for them, whenever we bought them, they're there, we use them, and we can't make a comparison for what they cost in the first place. The other comment of mine is I am not comfortable, not supportive of the very low rating that's being provided to the issue of size. And it's down at 5%, I believe. It's in front of me here, but my glasses aren't that good. For me, one of the key factors here is that, and I've said this over and over again, I'm going to start sounding like a broken record, but too bad. Won't be the first time. The whole issue of size to me is a critical component, because yes, we build a twin pad arena today. Down the road, whether it's in my time as a councillor or even in my lifetime, there may come the period where we would want to have a 6-lane, 8-lane competitive swimming pool. I'm thinking back to the Bradford model we looked at, or the Aurelia model we looked at, or the indoor double gymnasium, or the indoor tennis court, pickleball courts, or whatever. And the logical connection for those is into a complex. But if we have not picked a site where there's potential for addition, and we've not architected the initial building in such a way that it's easy to add to, then we've created, in my mind, a beautiful facility today, but a white elephant 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. I would say the same about the library. Yep, if we want to pack that library into, the site, in fact, the 3 sites are somewhat limited already, the 2-point-something acres, but there is some flexibility there with parking requirements and so forth. But, who's to say that at some point we want to have a cultural component in the library, but as the library grows and needs the cultural portion of the library for library function, and we need to add a cultural center, wing, whatever, or a performing arts facility, a small performing arts facility. For me, we should be building for the future, not just for today. And so to say that size is 5% of 100%, I won't support it.
Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is I'm going to go through my list of people to speak, and then if there's somebody wants to put forward a motion to change something here, then we'll do that at the end. Deputy Mayor Bray, you're next.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Wells. He very clearly explained his views of the cost of the property and whether we include it or not. We own it, it's ours. I think we need to do something with it. So I thank you for explaining it more thoroughly than I would have. And I just wanted to emphasize that the comments last night were great. I think the residents that came out asked questions, talked about why they preferred one or the other. The biggest concerns I heard was how to get their opinions across to council. You know, was this their only opportunity to provide input? And I think this survey really is important, and hopefully they all went home and they talked to their family and their friends and their neighbors and their co-workers and their employees, because they can influence where it goes and you know, how the discussion at the table goes, and that's the appropriate way to do it. So I'm happy to hear the town's going to emphasize how important it is to provide that survey.
Absolutely. Councillor Kinney, did you have your hand?
Yes, I did, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. And further to Councillor Wells' discussion about size matters, no pun intended. The question I come up with is, we're building for the next 50 years, but what is that, really? We won't know that until we get to 49 or to 40. So why not give ourselves that ability to grow when we need to grow? So I know Your Worship is looking for a motion. I'm not going to throw a motion out now, but what I'm thinking of, we could have something to do with, instead of going past 100%, we look at raising building to 10 and dropping the impact of the twin or synergy to 5.
Everybody mull that over for a minute. In the meantime, I do want to thank staff, all staff that were there last night. It was really well done. I think the majority of people who left were quite happy with the process, who maybe wouldn't get up at a public meeting or didn't want to sit through a 2-hour session to hear a bunch of other people at a mic. They were quite happy to be able to go around and get their information and get their direct answers from staff. So I think it was really well done, and thank you for all of that. And with that, Councillor Kinney has put a suggestion out there, but I would need a motion, and whatever is put out, I would ask if there's some comments from staff before we would move forward with that. I would want your input as to how that could affect something.
Well, I'd just like to comment to Councillor Kinney. I'm more comfortable with that concept, because while I think synergy is a factor, I don't think it's necessarily as significant a factor as this matrix generates it to be. Yes, I recognize there can be some savings. Yes, I recognize both in construction and in operation and maintenance. But I don't see it as significant as this matrix puts it. I think the cost was something like $400,000 operating costs was the difference. But that's in terms of the overall, when you look at the overall costs that are involved in either of these or both of these facilities, it's a very it's a very small portion.
So are you looking to put a motion forward to take size and put it down, or put it up to 10% and take synergy down to 5? Is that a motion that you'd like to put forward?
I would I would have preferred to see the size up there at the 15%, as is the accessibility, visibility, and proximity would have been my preference. So, no, I think for me, the accessibility, visibility, proximity, the future possibilities is equally as important as that. Again, not building it just because it has a nice frontage at the moment. Who knows what our development will be in the future? But again, that whole idea that we may want to expand, and if we can't do that, then we're limited. So
okay, so again, I'm going to put it out for a motion to come forward, because I think individually we could probably pick this matrix apart and all want different things. So I need a motion to come forward as to what the recommendation is. Councillor Kinney.
Your Worship, I'll put a motion forward to decrease synergy from 10% down to 5% and move size up from 5% to 10%.
And do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Foster. And staff, did you have any comments on that?
I think that is quite adequate for my thinking for the library. I think that the site that potentially has the synergy is already getting a potential bonus mark in the costing, so dropping it a little bit shouldn't really impact it tremendously.
Okay, so now we have questions or comments on this motion.
Yes,
Councillor
Your
Foster.
Worship. And the comment is, Pam just hit upon it. So in the synergy, there's two pieces. Does the site enable construction of both the library and Twin Pad Arena in one building? So is it going to save cost? Well, that can be caught in the next, under the cost section. The part of synergy that should remain is there a realized potential for cost sharing, and I would say, or benefit to other community partners. So in other words, you know, is there a synergy between either getting people to come in and sponsor it or to help promote businesses in the region? So that should remain. So that's why I agree. You take the 5% to me is double counted in the straight out cost piece because the cost is covered under the next section. So that's why I seconded that motion.
Okay, any other? Chris, go ahead.
I would only comment that this synergy idea was commented in the charts, but we didn't actually value a number in the gross extraneous costs for each site. We made this comment because it's a tricky one to estimate, and therefore we conservatively put forward this. It was 50,000 annual savings in operations. That was our number, and 450,000 was an estimate surrounding the construction cost, although we didn't tally it. Although we just have a ranking by place in order to get the scores and cost, so I don't think that it has much bearing, and therefore to look at the availability for potential partnerships and expansion in the future might be the key area.
Okay.
And Your Worship, I'd just like to congratulate staff. It adds up to 100%. I checked that.
I knew you'd be.
Have the librarian.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments on this motion? Can you read one? Did you have your hand up? No? Do you have something written down there? Could you read that, please?
So that it's moved by Councillor Kinney and seconded by Councillor Foster that we, in the matrix, decrease the weighted amount of synergies to 5% and increase the weighted amount for size to 10%.
Okay, any final comments on this? All those in favor? Opposed? So that is carried. Okay, this is the first time we've done this.
So, Your Worship, you would announce that the motion is carried with only Councillors Watson and Wells opposed.
Okay, thank you. And so this would be as amended, or? Just see. Motion is moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Watson, that Committee of the Whole receive the update on the Twin Pad and Library site selection criteria from the Director of Recreation, Events and Facilities and the Director of Library Services for information, and that Council approve the updated criteria for site selection, and that Council approve the weights to be applied as amended so the remaining sites can be ranked. And further, that Council direct the staff task force to score the remaining 3 Twin Pad and 4 library site options under consideration using the criteria and weights, and bring back the ranked list of sites for Council consideration and final site selection. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Opposed?
As amended, yeah.
So the as amended motion, all those in favor? Opposed? So it carries with Councillor Wells opposing. Okay. And if there's nothing else, we will adjourn. Thank you.